Hi, everybody. So nice to be here with you on the Global Light broadcast for August. I am really excited to talk about today. Today I want to talk about karma and past lives. It's such a fascinating topic to consider, isn't it? We may have beliefs, and I think in this group we all have common beliefs about reincarnation and having experienced many, many, many lives. So therefore we have past lives. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to access some of those without having someone else tell us about them, but to have our own minds reveal just the right information for us specifically, because our subconscious mind has every memory of every lifetime we've ever lived stored, and we have access to it through hypnosis. So I want to talk about some of these benefits and really get you thinking about your life, about consciousness, about presence, about accessing information and the power that you really do have if you learn how to yield it. So first, let's talk about karma a little bit, because with reincarnation comes the conversation of karma. It's the checks and balances of life. I like to think of karma as our insurance policy for learning. It's never about punishment, and in the West, it's been misconstrued a little bit about that, especially through old religions. In other words, we have no power, we're being watched, checked, evaluated, and if we do something wrong, it feels like punishment. When we think of karma, and one of the types of karma, balancing karma, for example, what you do is done unto you, that's not a threat. You see, in the East, their philosophical view of karma is that we live multiple lives for the purpose of healing or eliminating our conditioned mind. Right? That's beautiful. It means we are constantly evolving, growing, expanding. It's about our spiritual growth. And as a result, we are healing that conditioned mind, those false beliefs that our ego tells us, that inner voice that tells us we're separate, we're not good enough, we don't belong, we have to prove ourselves. Our whole society has been built on false beliefs, hasn't it, when we start to really look at it? And the Western view is that we live enough lifetimes that our soul infiltrates our personality. And what's interesting about that is the personality does not reincarnate, right? Meg of 14th century Scotland, and I'll tell you about that past life regression later on today, was very different than Meg in 2022. So our programming is what reincarnates so that we continue to expand and grow. That's soul expansion. And karma is what keeps that in balance. Does that start to make sense? So it's not about being punished, ever. It's about cause and effect for every action. For every thought, there's a corresponding emotion, and for every emotion, a corresponding thought, right? Checks and balances. When we start to think about living with an awakened mind, and you just ponder that for a minute, because we know that science has shown us that 95% of our daytime is spent unconsciously in a pattern, in loops of habitual thinking and behavior. Actions, so thoughts drive actions, loop again, based on what? Our programming, based on our false beliefs. Because everyone has programming that is based in negative and not in positive. And how do we know that? Are you living the life that you dream of? Are you making enough money? Are you in a happy relationship? Do you have wonderful support around you? Are you courageous and brave? Do you wake up every day excited? Is it easy to follow that inspired action? Is it easy to follow that intuition that comes in and you naturally take the next action? It's in an ebb and flow. You trust where your money's coming from. You trust what's coming next, right? There is a flow to this and a validation of it. And all of us have areas that we're learning to master, right? We come in with those life lessons. So in the areas where it's not quite where we want it to be, instead of judging it, comparing ourselves to others, listening to that voice that says, oh, we're not doing that well. Who are you to think you can do that? You can't have it all. You can have this, but you can't have this. All of that, that's all stories that we tell ourselves, aren't they? And you know what I'm talking about. We all tell ourselves a story to justify and protect us a little bit from the pain that it feels to look at that and think that we're responsible and therefore we failed. Therefore we're not good enough. Therefore we're not deserving. We're not lovable. Those are false. So karma, in the karmic wheel, we continue to incarnate, to master these lessons, and these checks and balances are in place. So let's get into that a little bit. Actually, I want to tell you a story first. I live next door. My next door neighbors are Tibetans, and it's a father and daughter that live in the house right next door to us, and they are so very lovely. And in the beginning, when we first started living together, their Eastern philosophy to not harm anything because we don't want that karma, right? So we take conscious action. We try to be as conscious as possible through our day, making choices that don't impact others because we don't want that balancing karma of what you do unto others is done unto you. Again, not a punishment, but an awareness. When we begin to live awakened, doesn't that mean we start to take care of the earth, take care of its creatures? Respect the balance. We live here together. We have equal rights on this planet. We have equal rights as humans. You can see we are out of balance, but we have choice every day for our own karmic balance, our own responsibility to be more conscious. And so one of the things the Tibetans did is that they don't kill anything. So there were weeds growing up between our properties, and then the weeds became bigger weeds, and then trees, and we had big weed trees, and I would drive in and our driveway was getting more and more and more narrow, and I was just thinking to myself, could I just go pull out those weeds? Could I just go take those weeds out? They're weeds, they're not flowers or trees. And yet now we've got this beautiful tree in between our properties that looks almost like a funky palm tree of Massachusetts, but it's their pride and their love, and the flowers that sprout up spontaneously in their yard without landscaping. But it's their conviction to live by their principles, their awakened principles, that humbles me. And so now every time I look at that weed tree, it's humbling to me. It reminds me, don't just go into your automatic program. You're thinking, you don't like it, let's get rid of it, control the environment. That's unconscious. Conscious is, this is a choice that they've made based on a belief that is so profound and tens of thousands of years old. And I respect that, and I can learn from that, can't I? There is a peace, there's a resonance that comes in when we're just talking about it, isn't there? And if we start to live that way with each other, imagine what can happen in this world. So there are other types of karma. Another is physical karma, and physical karma is quite literal. For example, in a past life, you shot someone in the abdomen and they died. And in this lifetime, you have unexplainable digestive issues with constant burning in your abdomen whenever you are eating heavier meals, and you can't quite explain it, and all your tests to investigate it come back inconclusive, or that there's nothing really there. And so this is something that you've carried over from a previous lifetime. I worked with a client once who suffered from constant allergies, and we did a lot of work around it. And when nothing resolved it, so clinical hypnotherapy, looking at programming from childhood, looking at when they began, these types of things, and when we weren't able to get the results, I knew that we had to go further. So we open the bridge in a session and go back into a past life. We give the instruction to the subconscious mind to find the origin of this. Your subconscious mind takes everything you say literally and as an instruction and responds. And we saw in that past life, her own mind revealed to us that she saw she was a male who ran an old mill factory and they were creating toxic shoe polish, and she was not a very kind boss or kind man. And as a result, many of his employees were very ill and had very sick lungs from breathing that all day as they worked in this factory. And so in this life, she constantly felt like her chest was compressed, brought on by the sneezing that, she thought was allergies, but it was this compression in her chest that she wanted to relieve, thinking it's the allergies. Well, that compression was key, because that really turned out to be the guilt that she was carrying, right? So there was a sense of guilt from causing this damage to other people, and it manifested in this lifetime as physical karma, these allergies that didn't respond to any form of treatment because it was something that her programming, remember, programming reincarnates, so her programming came in saying, we keep this chest compression, we never ever hurt people like that again. It's going to be a reminder for us, but it also was hurting her, and this isn't punishment. We can heal and remedy karma. So in seeing that lifetime, we were able to process it through. We were able to do some deep forgiveness work around it. We were able to see that through that whole lifetime, that wasn't everything that defined that individual. There were many other things that he did that were good. That was something that was quite innocent at the time. It wasn't intentional to hurt people, but it was a way that they were manufacturing at the time. And so when we begin to see and forgive and take in more information, we can collapse that. And then the allergies resolve themselves. So understanding a past life origin for a present life condition can be extraordinarily healing and powerful. Another type of karma is false guilt, taking responsibility for something that you are not responsible for. So we saw almost a little bit of that in the last example I gave you. In this, I worked with a client who had an unexplainable sensitivity and eye pain. It was just an eye pain that she went to an ophthalmologist. There was nothing wrong with her eyes. It didn't come on at certain trigger points, times of year, light sensitivity, things like that. There was just this recurring, low-grade, annoying pain and sensitivity. And when we dug deeper and traveled into a past life, because again, it wasn't resolving to the protocols that we were running from this current life, we'd cleaned up all that programming. So we opened the bridge and went into a past life. And she discovered that she was a girl in a past life that was very, very psychic at a time that was not safe to be so. And she was brave, and she tried to tell her village, her community, that there was a warring tribe coming. She saw the destruction of her village before it had happened, but they didn't believe her because she was a small girl. And so it all came to pass. And as a result, everyone perished, and she felt terribly guilty for that. She carried false guilt in this lifetime, thinking that had she just done something different, had she been louder, had she made them listen to her, had she taken her own family and run away, then maybe some could have survived. But that wasn't possible. And so she started to see that in this lifetime, that eye sensitivity, that eye pain was shutting down that gift and making sure that she never was in that type of situation again. And this client was a very, very intuitive client. So it was very powerful to be able to see that lifetime. And again, bring the forgiveness work in when we understand what's causing this and why. It's that false guilt. It wasn't your fault. Things have happened in our history that you can't necessarily change. Some of our evolution is harsh. So seeing that, but relieving you from that responsibility, from a gift that you tried, right? She had tried. This can be life-changing. When we recognize something that we're dealing with today from a false belief, right? Hear that, false guilt, false fear. Then we can clean it up. We can do something about it. And that becomes very, very powerful. False fear is the next one. And false fear is so so fascinating to study, because we all know, have heard stories, if not know someone. I knew someone at work that was terrified of water, and yet he had absolutely no bad experiences in water. And back then he used to say, it's got to be from another life. And people used to make a joke about that. It's got to be from another life. But it's actually true. It's actually very true. So, for example, you fell off a cliff in another life, and in this lifetime you are terrified of heights. I have a sister who is very uncomfortable with heights. She feels it calling her over, literally. And she's a smoker, so when she used to visit and she was on the balcony, she'd stand with her back against the wall as far away from the ledge as she could be, because she said, don't you feel it? Don't you feel the pull? It's like it's calling me over. Well, that comes from somewhere. And if it wasn't from an experience that caused trauma in this lifetime, like an almost fall or something scary when you were a child, then it comes from somewhere else. So I worked with a client that had a very, very unusual fear. And her fear was whenever she was in bodies of water, if she couldn't see, and she was only in very shallow, up to her ankles maybe, she had this very vivid fear of small fish biting her. And so as a result, she never really enjoyed vacations. She never really enjoyed traveling. You'd go on a beach holiday and she didn't want to go in the water because she'd always have this vivid imagery of these small fish biting at her feet. And so again, when we traveled into the past life that was the origin of this fear, your subconscious mind takes the instruction and goes specifically to that lifetime. And she saw that she was once a fisherman on a very large fishing rig out in the ocean. And the crew would catch the fish, and they would catch large fish, but they would also net all these small fish and bring them in and store them in freezers down below the deck. And then the captain would drive the boat in, and they would collect their earnings, and he would pay all of the other fishermen. And so she was one of the fishermen. And in that lifetime, the net, as it brought in thousands of fish, something broke in the functionality of how the mechanics worked, and all the fish spilled out, and she slipped and was lying down as a fisherman, as a man, and all the fish started biting at him. So biting at his legs, biting at his arms, biting at his feet. And so in this lifetime, she had a very vivid recall of these little fish biting at her, and so she was always uncomfortable near the water. So you can see that there was this, it's false because it's not from this life, but it's a very valid fear that came from a previous life's experience that left programming, left a belief in the subconscious mind, don't go in the water. Because the subconscious mind generalizes. So in her programming, it was anytime you're near the water, you could be bitten by all these fish. When we collapse that fear, when we reprogram that and work with the new positive suggestions, the fear dissipated. It took time. It took her a few months to get past that, but then she just slowly, baby steps. And just a couple of weeks ago, she sent me a picture where she has signed up to go deep water diving, which is amazing. So we can overcome things that we carry based on how karma overviews our lives. So we can actually remedy our karma. How we do that is really quite amazing, because karma is based on our thoughts, our actions, our words, and our emotions. So in the same way that in past lives, actions, words, situations can cause these beliefs, we can unravel those beliefs with the same applications, right? So what has created a negative, we reverse and create a positive. Now, how past life shows up is always very vivid. When you have recurring dreams, or when you have a dream, there are markers, there's criteria that let you know it's from a past life. And they are that they evoke emotion. You feel very strongly. You wake up from a dream that was so real. How many of us have had that? That was so real. It's out of present time. So it evokes a strong emotion, and we know that's not current because of the way the dream is revealed to us. That's the subconscious mind showing us the programming. But It's out of present time. We know it was from another time, a different time than what we experience today in our life. And you never forget it. You never ever forget it because it's so vivid. That's usually an indicator that that's past life revealing itself to you. Now that's programming, and it's your subconscious mind communicating that you've got something active that's being triggered by your soul expansion, by your growth. You may have hit a point where now all of a sudden this is inhibiting you, and the subconscious mind is showing you the conflict that's going on internally so that you can bring resources to it. You can go back, investigate it, collapse it, reprogram it. So you start to see how karma is our friend. It's not a punishment. It's a checks and balances system that we can work with consciously when we know how to. And another piece that was so interesting to me was, have you heard of the book? It's called Soul Survivor. This book has been verified by scientists. It was the story of James Leninger. And he's the subject. He's a well-known American child reincarnation case. And at the age of two, James was having frequent nightmares of being trapped in a burning plane that was crashing. So vivid emotion, out of present time, absolutely unforgettable, right? Meets the criteria for past life. In further statements to his parents, he said that he'd been shot down in a plane near Iwo Jima, and he had been based on a ship named Natoma. And he had a best friend named Jack Larson. Now, these are verifiable details that James had told them. So his parents started investigating this. And it turned out that these were factual. In fact, they actually flew over because Jack Larson was a vet who was still alive. I don't believe he is now, but at the time he was well into his 90s. And James Leninger met Jack Larson. And as soon as he saw him, he knew his nickname. He recognized him right away as a reincarnated 2-year-old. So he had remembered his past life where he was an American pilot killed in action in March of 1945. How extraordinary. Now, why did he remember that, and why do we not remember ours? As a clinical hypnotherapist, what's fascinating about that is before the age of 7, we have not developed that critical factor, that data analyzer that rests between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So everything that goes in to our minds that we take from our parents, our authority figures, our experience of life, immediately goes directly into the subconscious mind. We don't have logic yet. We don't have reasoning or rationing abilities in our conscious mind yet. So what does that also mean? Well, one, we're collecting a whole lot of programming, which explains why we each have programming, so there should be no judgment or shame about that. But 2, brain waves have been studied of children, and up before the age of 7, they are not in beta state. Most of them are in the subconscious levels of alpha and sometimes even delta while awake through the day. Now the rest of us have to drop down into that deep state of hypnosis, that beautiful relaxation to access our subconscious mind. But children are walking around all day long, right? Think about how creative they are. Think about the subconscious mind. It's literal and it's picture consciousness, and they're off in their minds. They are just walking around in subconscious mind and superconscious mind. And superconscious mind is the field. That's access to everything. So he was just allowing all of that subconscious memory, programming coming through, remembering that trauma. Now, he was trying to resolve the past life trauma, wasn't he? Through the nightmares, the programming was coming up. The vivid details that were verifiable was because it was just a pure stream of superconsciousness, wasn't it? How extraordinary. So our children prior to the age of 7 have a lot more to be valued for if we're paying attention. And society has taught us to kind of shut that down or think that they're making things up or imagining. How many spiritual people remember seeing things or hearing things or having imaginary friends or superconsciousness, right? Subconscious mind remembers everything. prior to our ability to have data compared, right? Taking in that data and comparing it against our programming, we don't have that process yet. That process hasn't been born yet. It hasn't been developed yet. It hasn't evolved yet. And so they are swimming in this beautiful subconscious and superconscious sea. And there are many, many more examples like that that are verifiable, that science is now starting to really honor and appreciate and accept the concept of reincarnation, and that we can access and verify our past lives. Something else that we do with past lives that I think is quite amazing is an additional, and it's not about how we carry karma, but it's how we can use past life regression therapy. And that is to go back to a lifetime, to something positive, where we developed a skill or an ability that could really come in handy right now, right? Because through karma and through reincarnation, we are choosing different life lessons for our growth. So that behooves us to know that in previous lifetimes, we may have mastered something else that we're kind of not working with actively right now, and we may have forgotten about it, and we may have this innate ability that's dormant, and we can wake it up if that's something that would help us today. And we can do that. So on September 24th, I want to let you know that I am going to be leading a group of people through a past life regression therapy session to travel back to a lifetime where you discover a positive skill or attribute that will assist you right now. I had a past life, so this is where I'll tell you a little piece about mine quickly. I experienced my first past life regression to a positive skill or attribute, and it was extraordinary because at first it feels like you're making it up. And I saw myself working, and the fire was going, and it was very old 13th century Scotland. I was working for a clan family. The house was large. I was working in one corner over in the back, and I was a healer. I was creating a lot of medicine at the time, poultices, tinctures, drying herbs, mashing herbs, adding liquids to them, making liquid tinctures. And I worked really, really hard. I was in that lifetime, and I just felt tired to my bones, but that was my job, and that's what I did. That was my service, and I saw so many children. I can remember it now, just talking about it vividly. There was just so many children that were coming to me. And at the time, when you think about it, this was, there was no penicillin. People were dying at very young ages, infections, pneumonia, these things were rampant. And I was seeing a lot of kids. But it explained something, so many amazing things. I went on to see some beautiful parts of that lifetime, a sister, a marriage. I passed on the information that I was learning to her daughter. But it was interesting because it explained some things to me about this current lifetime that I'm in. I never felt that desire for children in this lifetime. And I always felt a little guilty about that. Like, well, people don't really look at that. When you meet people, they say, do you have children? And I say, nope. And they kind of look at you like, oh, okay. And I think, well, dogs, lots of dogs, but no babies. And I just didn't have that pull this lifetime. It just wasn't for me. But boy, did that lifetime explain it, because I looked after everybody's children in that lifetime. All of them brought their children to me for everything, cuts, scrapes, bruises, infections. So I looked after a lot of babies, and I just did not want to look after babies in this lifetime. And that really released me from feeling, a little bit guilty as a woman, like you're supposed to have children, that's what you do. And that just dissipated right there, because I thought, oh, I've done that. I did a really good job of that. It also explained this ability that I have in this lifetime that I had no idea where it came from. And I make all my own body care products. I make the best chocolate body butter you have ever seen in your life. It smells delicious. It is so clean you could almost eat it, except for the shea butter. I don't want you to eat shea butter. But everything else in there is food grade. And I don't know where it came from, but I just developed the recipe. And so there's the body salves and the essential oil perfumes with the lavender and the jasmine and the rose and certain combinations. And I didn't know where I knew that from. But it was important to me to live a non-toxic life. And all of a sudden, going back to that lifetime, I realized that came from an old lineage. I learned that from my mother and my mother's mother, and I passed that on to my sister's daughter. And so it was extraordinary for me to understand where this came from and that I am part of that lineage, and so that you have access. So now here's where it gets interesting. You have access to go back and look around at that lifetime as often as you want. You have access to go back and have conversations and pick up more of those skills and bring them into this lifetime. How about that? Isn't that fascinating? Doesn't that become valuable for us as a tool to really understand more of who we are and bring more into our mission and our purpose here, more into our confidence and love and passion to live our life on purpose, who we are now, feeling good about that, collapsing any old programming that says we're not enough, because we are enough. Every single one of us is enough. And so thank you for that. I want you to think about that between now and next month. What might be happening in your life that comes from another time that you may not need to carry anymore? False guilt, false fear, physical karma, things that are unexplainable that you're ready to let go of. And if you'd like to do some one-to-one work, I love working with people. This is absolutely my passion, and I am happy to take you on and have a conversation. I offer free 30-minute consults, and then we can look at booking sessions for you. If that's something you want to investigate with me, I would be honored. So with that, I'll turn it back to you in the studio and say have a wonderful rest of your show. Thank you, as always, for allowing me into your heart and into your homes. It means so very much, and I hope you find my offerings valuable, insightful, and thought-provoking. Until next time, bye for now.